And in fact, the way we're going to actually get insights is by showing customers either PowerPoint, wireframes, clay models, prototypes, at any stage we can to actually gather as much information as we can about their feedback. And one of the things we're going to find out is that there are two unique things we do in a lean startup. One is when our hypotheses turn out to be incorrect, instead of firing people, we actually get to change those hypotheses. And these are called pivots. A pivot is defined as a substantive change to one or more of the business model canvas components. If it's a minor change, we call it an iteration. And so in a normal company or an old-fashioned startup, we fire the VP of sales if their assumptions were wrong. Here what we're doing is firing the plan. Not only does this work for startups, it actually works for large companies as well. We work for General Electric, one of the smartest big companies in the world. And GE was about to commercialize some of their high-temperature sulfur battery technology. And they wanted to offer these batteries to other companies for industrial applications. And they had done a great market research report and had pages of here's where the product should go. And the CEO was going to give the general manager, Prescott Logan, $100 million to just go build a factory and go execute, hire the staff and whatever. We have the technology and here's the report. But Prescott, luckily, said, you know, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like an existing business. This feels like a startup. And we ought to check our hypotheses. And so Prescott Logan and his customer development team flew around to almost every continent, in fact, every continent in the world, including Antarctica, and discovered that the requirements actually differed by industry segments. Substantially enough is that if they would have had a standard factory making standard product, they would have sold none of them. Because different customers required different packaging, different cooling, different connectors, and none of this was visible from inside the building. After 18 months, they figured out who the customers were, what they wanted, and then built the factory. And now, a couple of years later, they have backlogs for the next 3 years. And so what we now know is that no business plan survives first contact with customers. That means we wouldn't know whether we were right or wrong until after we shipped the product and customers gave us feedback. And by then, we burned lots of time, lots of money, and potentially are out of business. But imagine if you had a process that allowed you to quickly iterate and incrementally build the product a piece at a time for each increment, learning and discovering whether you were on the right track. What's the right track? Do you have the right customers for the right features, which we call product market fit? Do you have the right distribution channel? Do you have the right revenue model, right pricing, partners? Do you understand your costs? We have a process now to test each one of these incrementally, cheaply, and quickly. And that's what the whole lean startup model is about.
So let's kind of shift the consideration for a moment and talk about what's powered this. In addition to being a better methodology, what has contributed to what we've all seen as very rapid changes in how we do business. Well, we can start with Moore's Law, which Gordon Moore was the founder of Intel, which is a major chip manufacturing company. And what he had realized was that every year, this is back to I'm not sure I can read it, 19 whatever, up to 2020, which is an estimate, the number of transistors and resistors on a 1 square inch chip doubles every 18 months. And you'll see in a moment what that really looks like. But one of the things that's interesting about this line is that it is fairly stable. I mean, it's very stable. And yet think about the economic ups and downs that have occurred in those periods, a depression, large recessions. You're not seeing that reflected here. And then in 2014, a book came out called Bold. Very interesting book that gets into this this subject very well, I think. I found it fascinating. And the double whammy, the number of transactions per second, continues to go up. The cost per chip rapidly is decreasing. And so what the author did is they took the impact of improvements in speed, a factor, 500 times faster, 1,000 times faster, whatever, and multiplied it by the reductions in cost, 300 times less cost. So you've got these two things and you multiply it together, so you get an X-fold improvement during whatever period you're measuring. So the calculation they gave us in here was a 40-year period between 1972 and 2012. What was the result of impact in speed times reductions in cost? Anybody have a guess of what that might be? 15,000, okay. $1 million? 3.2 million. See, the problem is we can relate to the things that are around us, but when you start talking about numbers like this, you don't innately relate to them. Which would be what? I think you're closer. I'll tell you what it is. So anyway, this says the same thing. In my classes, this was the highest number we got, 10 billion. The answer is 100 billion. It's hard to fathom what that means, 100 billion improvement. But that's what we're playing with here, and that's why we can do stuff that is so phenomenal today, because we're able to process so many transactions for so little money. And so the conclusion is that people who figure out a way to harness the technology as well as the better procedural ways of doing things are bound to be successful. So any questions about this? Okay, well, here's the parting shot. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, and here's his vision of the world. Oops. I guess I have to click on him.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
We get something, the faculty members get something called Purdue Today, which is a daily little blurb on stuff going on, and they report on anything newsworthy, and they also report on the national news when it's talking about Purdue. And there's always something going on where somebody's talking about what's going on in this environment. And, but what's going on in the laboratories here at Purdue is just phenomenal. I can remember when President Daniels came in, he'd been the governor of Indiana and then took this job, and he talked about bold moves. And one of them had to do with agriculture, that Purdue had been spending time and money on increasing yields in crops because to feed the world's population as it's expected to be by 2030, major changes had to occur. And that there's a lot of research that's gone on at Purdue to work in that direction. Another had to do with prescription drugs and the ability to more quickly get them through a process that proves their efficacy. And what I found out that I didn't know is that Purdue, at the time of this video, which was about 6 years ago, had 36 molecules that the FDA had approved or was in the process of approving. And the point was made that any pharmaceutical company in the US would be happy to have half that number. So Purdue has some pretty amazing things going on that, you know, as Mr. Jobs talks about, can do some interesting things in the world. So, okay, thank you for your attention. And if you have nothing more for me that I can answer, I'll be glad to answer anything you want. But otherwise, I appreciate your attention. Okay, thank you.